History was made last November when Bristol's first female mayor was elected, and now is setting the direction of the All Heart City's future. It's not every day you get to interview the boss, so Mayor, thank you so much for taking time with us. Now, a year ago, you were celebrating a great victory of being the first female mayor of Bristol. Are you surprised it took that long to have a female mayor?
In some ways I am. We became a city in 1913, and here we are standing in the Military Museum celebrating World War I and the exhibit.
Spinning, isn't it?
That was right around the time women received the right to vote. And fast forward 100 years later, Bristol elected its first woman mayor.
So that's terrific, and you're right. We're at the Bristol Historical Society. This is near and dear to your heart because before you're mayor, you've spent hundreds of hours helping nonprofits around town. Why should Bristol or somebody in Bristol care about the Bristol Historical Society and other nonprofits?
So we're really fortunate here at the Bristol Historical Society that not only are we the caretakers of Bristol's story and that history that happens every day and continues to happen, but we are also home to the Bristol Sports Hall of Fame and the Memorial Military Museum. So as we stand here in the Jack Dennehy Gallery, it's one of those things where we all are tied together by parts of a community, whether you are a standout athlete at Bristol High School, whether you're at Bristol Eastern right now, whether you were in the armed forces during World War I, or whether you're serving today. Those are the ties that bind our community together, and I think these nonprofits are here for posterity to tell that story for future generations.
There have been a lot of great changes over the past year to the Historical Society. What are some of those?
So we have spent, since acquiring this building in 2002, we have spent the last decade piece by piece rebuilding what is one of the architectural gems here on Federal Hill. It straddles our historic district and downtown. It was our first high school, and it was quickly outgrown due to the Industrial Revolution. But this building really, I think, represents what people feel so strongly about in terms of our architectural history. We spent most of the 1960s tearing down downtown. And in a lot of people's hearts, they felt that the soul of the community vanished with that. So we have very few buildings that remain from that era. And so I think that there's been a large amount of coalescing around these pieces in order to maintain them and find a new home for them and a reuse. And this one, I think over the past 15 years, we've succeeded in literally brick by brick, rebuilding it, rebranding it, bringing in new partners, and making a state-of-the-art facility.
Well, and you can kind of get a sense that, this doesn't look like some local museum. This is professionally done, displayed, and really tells a story about, a lot of the military and veteran history of our city.
Well, Bristol has a really strong passion for its veterans, and Jack Dennehy started the Memorial Military Museum in 1976 as part of the bicentennial celebration, and it's endured since then. As I mentioned, he had to move it here when the armory closed in the post 9/11 movement, where all armories were closed to the public. And now his widow, Carol Dennehy, and his family has continued on his mission.
We could talk about this all day. Why don't we talk about the last year and go into the library? Ellen has many different initiatives she's concentrating on, and they all have one thing in common: making Bristol a great place to live, work, and play. So Mayor, now we're in the library. There's so many aspects to the Historical Society that I don't think people know. We're surrounded by books that have nothing to do with Bristol in our area. It really is kind of a collaboration of a lot of people having input into the society, isn't it?
It is. We have a strong manufacturing history, so you can find a lot of information there. We have street indexes. We have all of the directories, so if you were interested in genealogy or research on your house, you could come see who lived in it 100 years ago. And it's also a great repository for all of the businesses that made up Bristol 100 years ago or more, with all the ads and memorabilia.
Well, I'm looking at the Muzzy, Bristol largest development in the state, and I know that you're is it a foster mother, or you coordinate the out-of-town players who have nowhere else to stay?
Right, so our Bristol Blues come in every summer, and about half of the roster needs to have host homes in order to make that team successful and contain the cost. So I've been coordinating the host family programs since they came here 4 years ago.
You do sleep, right?
Sure.
Let's talk about the past year. What has been the biggest surprise in your first year as mayor?
Well, I think I would have to say that the amount of paperwork, even in today's day of technology, there's still so many signatures required and hard copies, and just really the bureaucracy attached with getting things done. Sometimes even a myriad number of committees that something has to go to before it can be actually enacted. And I think that and the amount of time it takes on a daily basis, where I'd rather be doing other things, has really been the biggest surprise and disappointment that I can't move things along.
Let's talk a little bit about what you were talking about in the Military Museum. A lot of big and positive movement for the Memorial Boulevard School.
Yes. Representative Chris Siogas was able to secure a $55 million grant with school construction money that had been turned back by 2 other communities that couldn't complete their projects. So Bristol was definitely in the right place at the right time, and we were able to kind of switch gears a little bit away from a community arts theater-based building to an arts magnet school that will service Bristol students predominantly, and if spaces were available, we would open it up to surrounding communities. But the most exciting part of that is the theater. We have a state-of-the-art theater there with a historic balcony, flyover space, and all kinds of amenities. And with a little bit of refurbishment, that could really be a gem. And one of the reasons I've been so interested in this project for the last 4 or 5 years is that I really do believe that, especially with the backdrop of the failed Renaissance project and some other programs that have been non-starters, I do believe a community theater can be a catalyst for downtown. And once you have a destination, people are going to be looking for other things, whether it's restaurants or a place to have coffee and dessert after a show. Those types of spillover economic factors will come into play. You know, one of the best memories I have of that recent task force and how we got things done in order to move it to the next part is the cleanup day. We decided to do some trial shows to really see if having that theater would attract a venue of people that would come and pay. So we did a cleanup day, and we advertised it and invited people to come. And we had over 200 people show up that day, and they ranged in age from 8 years old to 80 years old, people who had actually attended and graduated from that school as a high school. And it really spoke to me in that I really firmly believed that people would get around and support the reuse of that building based on the nostalgic connection, never mind the fact that it sits on the gateway of the Memorial Boulevard and as an entryway to downtown.
Let's talk about some more rejuvenation. The farmers market was bigger and better this year. How did that happen, and what do you see for the future of the farmers market?
You know, the farmers market was an interesting piece for me because I looked at it in a couple of different ways. Back to what I said about urban renewal, people really felt as if the heart and soul of downtown had been ripped out. There was no gathering place. There was no central location. And I thought that in a small microcosm type of way, if we could get people thinking about coming downtown on a Saturday, that's going to start hopefully a rhythm of future businesses. So now people are coming downtown on a Saturday for more than just buying stamps. And I'm thinking eventually that farmers market can grow. As we sell off parcels on downtown, we're going to probably have to look at different locations. But it also showed me that there's some other interesting aspects of a farmer's market that I wasn't aware of. One, we're helping small businesses grow and find a market. And Real Cafe is the best example of that. Nobody knew anything about Eduardo and his coffee beans from Colombia.
He is so pro-Bristol.
He is, and until he started coming to the market. And again, it was one of those examples of if you show people what your product is, they will want it. And he took a couple of Saturdays off while he was working on some of his packaging and promotional, and we had angry people looking for their coffee and wondering where that booth was. So I think that having some opportunities for that, we actually have somebody coming this Saturday who's going to be doing maple syrup that he taps here in Bristol. So lots of interesting, innovative opportunities for new businesses or startup businesses.
A little bit more serious note, one of the things that you campaigned on and you've actually worked on for years is about the ever-growing crisis about opioids. Where do we stand in Bristol, and have we made any kind of progress?
I think we have made small pieces of progress, and I think the first most important piece is removing the stigma so that you can actually have a community conversation. Right. We have people who are suffering from opioid addiction, whether it's pills or they've moved on to heroin or there's just chronic abuse of any other types of drugs within the community. We have people in place and programs in place to help them, but people need to ask for the help and they have to be able to commit to getting the help. We have families that have been struggling with loved ones for years, and they don't know where to go as well. So the task force is comprised of people from across the gamut. It's healthcare providers, it's family members who are struggling with loved ones, it's people in recovery, it's people who offer services and counseling, it's people who understand the data, and it's also people who have alternative methods to manage pain, which is a big piece of it. I can't even tell you the number of stories I've heard from older people, and actually the people who are dying in Bristol are older white men between the ages of 35 and 50. If you look at the chief medical examiner's reports, that's the demographic. So it's not young people who got hooked on marijuana and then proceeded into heroin. It's not poor people. It's not just people who have mental health issues. It's everybody. But the largest growing segment are people who are addicted to their pain pills. And that could be because of a knee surgery, back injury, all of these things. And they try to get off of them, but there's no appropriate alternative ways to get off. So we've added people to the task force, like Dr. Glenn Palmisano, who's a chiropractor, counseling, acupuncture, all different types of things to let people know that there's options. So the community conversation piece is the biggest piece. Knowing where to go for help is the second biggest piece. And so we've created a brochure that are going to be distributed by first responders. So if a police officer, ambulance, or even a fire department member is at a scene and there's a suspected overdose, there's a flyer that they can leave on the kitchen table or the hall table so that when that family or people that care for this person who's had an opioid episode come home, there's something for them to reference.
This is a nationwide problem, so it's not unique to Bristol.
It's not unique to Bristol, but one of the startling data pieces that I saw when I was still working at the Connecticut Pharmacists Association before I was elected was that in Bristol, in calendar year, I believe it was 2016, we had over 150,000 prescriptions written for pain meds. For a community that does not have a pain clinic attached to its hospital, those are startling stats, and we need to also deal with our prescribing physicians for them to understand that there's alternative methods as well.
You brought up an election, you just get through your first year, and in a couple of months you're going to be thinking about, I'm assuming, that being reelected. Is 2 years the right amount for a term for mayor? I mean, can you really get anything done? I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
I think you can get things done, but I will tell you that is an exhausting process.
Yeah.
And I've been very fortunate to have a very proactive and working city council, so it's been very easy to delegate big pieces of policy, big pieces of appearances, coverage of meetings, and all of the community appearances that people want their city officials to be at to the 6 members of the city council. I do believe that there's probably time right now, if we do another charter revision, to talk about the fact that a 4-year term would be appropriate. I think they touched upon it last year, but there's some ancillary issues. How do we do the Board of Ed, which is a staggered term now with 4-year terms? What would we do with the council? Would we move to at-large? Would we stay with districts? And frankly, I think if we're going to have a conversation about a 4-year term for mayor, the city is also poised to have the conversation about whether a city manager is a better form of government.
I've got to ask the obvious questions. What do you think your biggest achievement was, and maybe what your biggest disappointment is, and what do you see as one of the major challenges ahead in the next couple of years for Bristol?
I would have to say that one of the biggest accomplishments is really calming the waters at City Hall with the toxicity levels being somewhat high over the last couple of years. We have great employees. 95% of the people come to work every day and want to do a fantastic job. The 5% that don't, we've been working with. And obviously, we want everyone to be productive. I think that collaboration between management and the unions is huge. I am sick and tired of people dumping on the backs of city employees as if they are the bane of our existence or the source of our financial problems.
Or stereotyped. I've run into that, yeah.
Whether it's state employees or city employees, it's just completely unfair. And the example that I can point to is one of the biggest accomplishments is coming out of a budget that the new controller and I both inherited that we did not create, that 4 months into it had a $4 million deficit. So not only did we have to dig out of a deficit, but also had to prepare for the next year. And with the help of the unions, specifically the police and the fire unions, they came to the table and we did an entire reorganization of our pension reporting system, which saved us $4.6 million coming into this budget year, but over the next 15 years could possibly save the city, its taxpayers, $50 million easily, just a round number, because we don't have to contribute to our pensions anymore because we've balanced it with one actuarial report. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not contributing or that we're not maintaining our pensions, but we have one of the best rated pension systems in the state, probably the country. And now we're using it as an asset. We're putting that money to work to benefit the taxpayers and having money available to us for other programs or potentially tax relief if the state doesn't prove to be a stable fiscal partner.
Well, and another thing is Bristol is one of the very few towns that have really high ratings from the rating bureaus in Connecticut because our state is having serious issues. So when people look around the state, Bristol's got to stick out because of that, I would think.
We do. And even with all of the challenges that we've had, in October last month, we maintained both of our high ratings with Fitch and Standard & Poor's.
And that's good news. Our brand is we are the All Hearts City, and if you look at the volunteers, the dedication and the thankless hours, the Mum Festival Committee, and everybody that's involved with that really embodies what Bristol is.
They do, and some of my earliest memories are sitting on the curb on North Main Street watching the parade with my family and cousins, and I think that those are the memories that connect people back to their hometown no matter where they end up in their life.
You made history as the first female mayor. Here we are in the Historical Society. I guess we just keep writing history and going on.
I hope so.
Mayor, thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
To learn more about all the services supplied by the City of Bristol, go to www.ci.bristol.ct.us.